Hi, I'm Janice Switlo, and today I want to bring attention to another short quote from authors Stephen Clarkson and Christina McCall on their Trudeau in Our Times, Volume 2, The Heroic Delusion. And it's important to consider this, and it illustrates how, and these are prominent authors versed in politics and writing, etc., do quite a comprehensive job on the legacy, if you will, of Trudeau's impact and his time in politics. But it just goes to show that Canadians operate under a really limited understanding of Constitution and Canadian government and its lawful foundation. And so they're saying it was not too early to tell, a decade after his retirement, that Trudeau's effect, and now this is Pierre Elliott Trudeau, our current Prime Minister's father, when he was Prime Minister, that Trudeau's effect on the Canadian polity had been profound. By negotiating with the provincial premiers an agreement that allowed Canada to achieve full sovereignty through patriating its constitution, he completed the nation's formal development from colony to nation state. It's really important to understand that the Crown has never had full sovereignty to begin with. And the Crown could only delegate and pass and hand off to her Canadian governments the limits of what she herself, what the Crown itself has. And again, under treaties, the first constitutional step, the foundation, that allowed her to begin exercising partial political sovereignty through her governments that then obtained levels of self-government through the years, does not include having full, whole sovereignty. The underlying title remains in the Indigenous nations' hands. It was not, she did not obtain that. She did not go to war, she did not. She entered into treaties that remain binding. There's no exit provisions. And so it just goes to show, though, that yes, from colony to nation state, but a nation state that does not own underlying title, but rather its land mass is an estate and interest beneath that of the holdings of the Indigenous nations. This is a critical component. In order to obtain full, whole sovereignty, Canadian governments have gotten as much as they can from the Crown. The Crown has reserved certain royal prerogatives, including entering into treaties, including declarations of war, etc. So these are things that Canada cannot do on its own. Of course, being a constitutional monarch, the Crown must act on the advice of her Privy Council members, but these are still critical elements of sovereignty that she retains. So Canadian governments have gotten the most they can from her. She's not giving any more. In order to get that underlying full control of that underlying title, and with it all the resources, and no limitations on what you can take up and who can take up, so that Canada can indeed say to, and the provinces can say to companies, yes, I can guarantee you that if you pay me this amount, I will let you go in there and take those things. Canada cannot presently do that. So this is why Canada is desperate to get the Indigenous nations done in, to get out from underneath, because once they're done in, the treaties fall. And once that's all abandoned, that bundle, the rights, the full sovereign rights, if you will, that are left beside the road, if you will, because Indigenous nationals, warned, hundreds of years ago, don't do this. The Crown can lawfully pick that up, and the Crown then will hold actual full title and own all the animals, for instance, on the basis of her laws. That way, only at that point, can Canada then fully control, because whatever the Crown holds, it's exercised and controlled by her governments. And that's when you get into the other constitutional documents, 1930 to 1980. Sorry, 1867, 1930, big ones, and 1982. So this is why the big push to get chiefs to say, I carry the authorities and I can sign off for my band members, and then enter into opt-in legislation whereby they become incorporated. If there's no one left, if the only thing that's done are these new legal entities created by federal legislation, then obviously there is no more nation. However, that's de facto. That's the image created. It's not really true in terms of how they're putting this into place. They're not, the actual decision making, the choice still remains with the people, with the Indigenous nationals. And they're banking, you know, Canadian governments are banking that Indigenous people, Indigenous nationals will just sit back and let it happen. And that enough time will pass that it can be said that they did truly abandon. They knew what was going on. This is what makes it difficult when I share this and explain this information, because it can theoretically work against Indigenous nationals if they decide not to do anything about it, if they don't speak up and say, hey, no, we still hold our authorities, and no, under our laws, under Indigenous law, we can't do that. We can't sell our land. We will share it. We will do these things. We've entered into treaties, for goodness sakes. And we have outstanding issues we have to discuss, and we need to engage in further diplomacy. But what's not needed, and what keeps being forced down the throats, while keeping Indigenous nationals poor, hungry, unhealthy, uneducated, or insufficiently educated, is this promise of, here's a bunch of money. And the people say, oh, a bunch of money, that's going to make my life better. Well, it doesn't. All it does is give away everything that could actually make your lives better. And that's all I have to say.